Thank you, Amala, for the introduction, and thanks to the Architecture League for having us here, and thank all of you for showing up on St. Patrick's Day. I know that's a sacrifice for many. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. Hayes and I founded Slade Architecture in 2002, and we've collaborated on all the projects together, but also with everyone who's come through our office in these 8 years. And then a series of consultants and outside collaborators on most of our projects. So this is work that we've done sort of as a group at Slade Architecture. As most architects, we have to deal with the context that is given to us when a project comes in. And we like to really develop the idea that each project is unique, and that because it has a unique set of characteristics that inform the project, including the program, the budget, environmental issues, the context, and the physical context. We like to think that all of our solutions are unique to each project, and that the project is really a result of these forces that are acting sort of on it, sort of from the outside. At the same time, we do have a practice that has a sort of continuous development, and one of the things that we always strive to bring to a project is the idea that the program is a given, and then the context is this other given thing. And what we hope to do is that our project creates this third thing that maybe is unexpected. Hopefully it comes from a sort of dialogue between those two things that start the project. And if there's something that we strive for, it's that kind of direct relationship between the project and its sort of immediate context, including the program and client objectives. If the iPhone is an example of this. It's a phone, but it provides all this other stuff that you sort of wouldn't expect in a phone. So these are kind of, when you think of architecture, you can also think of it as this kind of pure idea, that has to do with the body and shelter. So these kind of contextual issues could be thought of as extrinsic to the pure architectural idea. So those things sort of create a variety of solutions or designs, and then there's this kind of intrinsic thing that maybe ties everything together, making a tasty kind of life as an architect. So these things have to do with sort of very elemental ideas about body, the relationship of body to the object. We feel that architecture is really that at its basic level, is you're accommodating a body in a space. And so as we look at how we can sort of develop that through all of our projects, we're very aware of this relationship between the occupant and the object. And we often use ideas or play with ideas of perception in order to sort of engage the occupant with the space. Another thing that's sort of intrinsic is that this thing is going to be built out of something, because all of our projects have the end goal of being built. And so there's always this idea of material, and we strive to use that in much the same way to sort of inform the project and heighten the relationship between the user and the architectural artifact.
This first piece that we're going to show is interesting because it really highlights a number of the things that James was just discussing. And it was an installation that we did at Interface Floors Showroom in Atlanta, Georgia, at the invitation of Interior Design magazine. We were invited with a handful of other architects and designers to create a space. They gave everyone a set footprint, and we had to create a space that would highlight their product. And the first thing that really struck us about the challenge was that Interface Floor provides these carpet tiles, which is a modular product, and it's typically used in just a field construction where the modular nature is employed for convenience. And we thought that it would be very interesting to entertain and sort of celebrate the kind of unit structure of them. The other thing that was immediately apparent was that the footprint that we had to work with was very small, and the dimension of one of the sides here is actually only 20 feet. And the third point that we thought was interesting and slightly whimsical was that floor reminded us, obviously, of flower, and if there was some way that we could incorporate that into the design, that would be fun. So thinking about this modular nature and the challenges that we had, we thought it would be effective to employ a radial kind of construction. And so we embraced this radial grid pattern that we created, but thought that just to deal with the very small footprint we had, we would just build 1/4 of it and use reflection to kind of virtually complete the other 3/4. So you can see here the plan, and we have on the left side the constructed pieces, and on the right side the pattern that's actually in the floor. And the result is that we lined the mirrors, we lined the walls with mirrors so that the pieces, the two built pieces, are actually completed, and then the cross reflections create a kind of infinite field, which you can see here. And the end result that we sought to create was a kind of lounge space that functioned somewhere between landscape and furniture. And interestingly, it faces away from the showroom, so if people would choose to actually use it as a lounge, it's a real possibility.
This next project is actually, I think, the first project that Hayes and I worked on when we founded Slade Architecture, and we worked on this collaboratively with Gilson's Murray Stefik. It was a 2,000-foot tower to replace the transmission towers that were lost after 9/11. The client and the site were at the Liberty Science Center. They were looking to, a bunch of different agencies and sites were vying for this thing, and so we were brought in by GMS and Langen to help them with the design. What struck us is that, you know, putting a 2,000-foot object out there, it was going to be very visible from metropolitan New York and New Jersey, and we thought that was a sort of key component. So thinking about that, we came up with this idea of very simple structure. It's basically 3 tripods that are stacked on top of each other and sort of rotated. When you look at it in plan, it's a very simple, stable-looking structure. But what we liked about it was that in elevation, from different points of view, it goes from a sort of symmetrical condition to a symmetrical, almost out-of-balance condition. And we thought this was important because as you move around the metropolitan area, this huge object would sort of change and not just be a static element. The other thing that was part of this is that the program in here was a sort of amenity space associated with the museum on the first level, and then an observation tower on the second level. The first 2 tripods were designed to be made out of concrete, and the top tripod was going to be steel. The top platform was only for the transmission towers and did not have a sort of occupiable public program on it.
The next project we're going to talk about is the smallest project we've ever done, and it's 36 inches tall. We were invited to make a donation, design a donation for the Design Trust for Public Spaces auction last fall, and the charge was to create a nest. The requirements of a nest were that it house an actual living creature and that the successful bidder be able to bring it home in a taxi. So we immediately seized on this idea of building something for all those New York dogs that we love. We don't have one, but we do love them. So we had to design and fabricate this ourselves in a fairly short time, so we really sought to make it as simple as possible, and we kind of treated this as an exploration of what we might be able to do with plywood. So we examined the different ways that plywood, and we were very interested in the way the planar nature of plywood would intersect with the conical structure that we were proposing for our pup tent. And so we examined a number of different stacking strategies, both horizontal, vertical, diagonal, and we eventually arrived at this idea of stacking them vertically, laminating them together, and you can see here the cutting pattern that we used. This is the final laminated structure. And then to really accentuate the contrast that we were creating with the plywood, we sanded the outside smooth and left the inside with the stepped construction. You can really see the way the curves are created by the different layers of plywood, which was something we were striving for. The top is open, which allows natural light in, and it's a mini sustainable structure with the puppy stack effect. Here you can see the contrast really between the exterior smooth and glossy with the laminations, which actually curve at this point, and the stepped interior. This is the pup tent around town.
One other thing is we just found out this week that won AIA Small Projects Award, which is kind of a nice surprise for us. It may be the smallest project in the Small Projects Award. The next project is the Ordos 100 project, which is 100 villas that are designed to be built in Inner Mongolia. it's based on a master plan by Ai Weiwei and Fake, and Herzog and de Meuron selected 100 architects from around the world to all come to Mongolia to build 10,000 square foot villa each. What was interesting is that Ordos is a new development, so really there's nothing there. They're building a city, and this development is on the periphery. This is the site. So as opposed to, or in contrast to the other projects that we have, which have a lot of contextual clues, this sort of was lacking. So we took the master plan that Ai Weiwei had created, which basically had a series of primary and secondary roads, and it created two kind of footprints that were allowed sort of within the zoning or massing. And then what we thought was most interesting and unique about the master plan is that each house is kind of circumscribed by a path, which sort of implies that you're supposed to look at these things as a field of objects and sort of view them almost like, museum pieces or something. The ultimate success of that strategy on an urban scale, has yet to be seen, but we were happy to be included in the group. Like I said, we had so few constraints that we accepted the volume, which by no means was necessary. And so what we did is we found that in order to accommodate the program, we really needed to sort of sink part of the volume down. And once we did that, we realized that the space that was pushed down to the ground had to be opened up to the exterior. And then the sort of courtyard that we formed also had to be opened up to receive light and views. The house is organized basically in 3 levels. The ground level are the more public spaces, the living room and dining room, and they're open to the landscape. It's sort of a continuous built space. The family spaces are organized around the courtyard, and then the sleeping spaces are on top as sort of discrete volumes. There are corresponding views that relate to each of those levels, but the primary relationship is that the lower level spaces are open to that promenade that circumscribes the building and sort of engage in that public view, whereas the rest of the building is more private and inward focused. Because we were engaged with that sort of view and the whole thing is meant to be a sort of a series of objects, we thought we should really engage the view and the fact that people are moving around it. So we played with perspective so that from different points of view, the object appears to change dimension. And then the massing is also used so that by creating different facets from different points of view, you understand these things as different size or volumes. The other thing that was a sort of given is that the materials that we should use in China that are most sort of least expensive and most readily available was brick. So we said we thought that was a good opportunity. We also realized that the labor is relatively inexpensive there, so we thought this was a good opportunity to create a slightly more intricate pattern using the brick. So this is the coursing for the brick, and it's basically organized around the geometry that we had established earlier, so that when the intersection happens, the brick simply follows that pattern, and then it normalizes itself as it gets to the next corner. And that alternates by each course. And so if you flatten out the skin, what ends up happening is that you get this sort of changing pattern that connects from corner to corner. The other thing that we did is we sort of opened up or removed bricks in certain areas to allow light and views into the building while still maintaining this kind of exterior kind of skin, protective skin. Throughout the day then, because of the pattern of the bricks, you get a changing shadow pattern. So the object changes not just in relation to the viewer, but also throughout the day, sort of, and in different seasons as the light angle changes. This is a view from the main street. View at the main entrance, you can see the public sort of more open dining room there, and then the living room facing the secondary street, and the sort of more closed off north-facing view. This is a view from the main street. On the interior courtyard, we created some openings, and we used sort of planted boxes there to help us block the sun in the summertime, and in winter when there are no leaves, it would allow the light into the space to help with heating and cooling. There are huge temperature fluctuations, as you might expect in Mongolia. And then we took advantage of the fact that we had a pool as part of the program, and that we'd sunk part of the space into the ground for passive heating and cooling. We worked with Arup on the heating and cooling, and worked with GMS on the structure. This next project is also a house. It's located in rural Pennsylvania on 60 acres of land. There are very few houses and no footpaths around this. What we thought was most interesting about the site is the fact that you have these long fields sloping down to a stream on the right side there, and then a pretty steep ravine that sort of cuts through the site with a stream. I'm sorry, it's pretty densely wooded. And so our strategy was to place the building on that boundary between those very different landscapes, so that from inside the building, when you're looking out, it's almost like you're in three different sites. So whereas the Ordos house was very much kind of driven from the outside, this is driven from the inside out. After we decided on that strategy, we looked at different ways that the shape of the house could begin to shape the exterior space as well. So starting with a very simple bar, from the original idea, it kind of transformed into a sort of Y-shaped building, which also defines sort of exterior rooms. The basic operation with the landscape is we thought, okay, what can you do to the landscape? You can sort of carve it out, you can embed something in it, and you can also place something on it. So using a series of stone walls that referred back to the existing stone walls that cut through the field, we sort of created these three volumes, one sort of sunken, one embedded, and one placed on top. The main house is still this kind of pure bar cut out for the views and sort of placed on that. This is the plan. And then the building sort of emerges from the landscape following the contours. And at the bottom edge, the house is sort of suspended over the ravine.
This next project is a lobby at 22 East First Street, which is in SLCE building, and the client was Avalon Bay Communities. The thing that really struck us about this project was that it's in the Lower East Side, and people are really choosing to live here. It's a residential building, I forgot to say, sorry. People are really choosing to live here for the location and for the scene. I think we can all appreciate that, especially here tonight down on the Bowery. And so we thought that we would embrace that and actually try and pull the street scene in as much as possible, thereby pushing the threshold back into the building. So you can see sort of through the use of materials, we've kind of brought in this brown terrazzo, which is actually recycled glass terrazzo, kind of recalls the sidewalk, and it comes up to this very strong boundary at the concierge desk, which is formed with the aluminum and the back mirrored satin etched glass. One of the first big moves that we did was to move the amenity space actually up to align with the lobby so that they could be visually and physically connected and also come to the perimeter. And in this way, we were able to bring some natural light in. We also used reflection here at the end walls to lengthen the space. Once the lobby space was spilling down into the amenity space, that threshold became even more strong. Here's a view down. And obviously in the daytime, now that the amenity was immediately adjacent to the street, you could bring light in. We accentuated this by coving the ceiling so that it has this smoothing of the edges, really reinforcing this upward kind of feeling. And then at night, the activity and light spills out onto the street, making it seem like a very desirable place to be. And again, linking it up with the scene outside. This is the view actually from the exterior looking in. And as you can see, the glass provides a reflection, but not a perfect reflection. So it's not distracting, but yet at the same time shows the activity.
This next project is for Coney Island Aquarium. This was done a couple of years ago. We were I guess the EDC was developing a master plan for sort of redeveloping the Coney Island Boardwalk. And one of the things they identified was the need to create an iconic structure at the aquarium side, at the aquarium end of the boardwalk. We were, I guess, brought in through the EDC to work with WCS on a project that they had that was ongoing for a shark building on the boardwalk, and to sort of create a more iconic structure there that sort of met the needs of the EDC and their long-term plans. What was distinctive about the aquarium, and it's still the condition that exists, is that there's a big concrete wall that separates the aquarium from the ocean and the boardwalk, which we thought was a little bit odd. We did not want something closed off. We thought it should be more like a sponge. And ideally that boundary works more like a reef, so that the environment on the boardwalk and the environment within the aquarium could sort of mix. So this is the idea of breaking down these two edges so that there's a sort of dialogue between them. The other thing that we thought was interesting is that the movement and the occupation of the building is very scripted. It's a sort of narrative. You go through, you start at point A and end at point B. But the boardwalk is this sort of unscripted space, sort of invention and performance. And we thought that the dialogue between those two would be a very fruitful dialogue. So we thought that the exhibit itself should sort of be engaged visually from the outside. So to that end, we sort of created a transparent skin so that as you move from exhibit to exhibit, you're constantly being pushed out with views to the ocean and then views back into the aquarium. As you go from the ocean to the aquarium, you have this kind of progression from from the kind of most natural condition that can be found, which I guess is the ocean, and then that moves through the reconstructed dunes onto the boardwalk, and then at this most artificial condition, which is the tank, which then replicates the condition on the ocean. So what we wanted to do was carry that idea through by creating sort of extending that artificial landscape and literally creating a dune that sort of takes over the part of the building. The idea here was that, maybe referring back to the to Lyris, New York, the idea that, the amusement park represents this test fantasy city, and maybe that at our end we could provide a kind of natural counterpoint to that. So what we did is we proposed that the boardwalk would sort of morph into a landscape element going out to the ocean and then climbing up onto the building. And that allowed us to push some of the dark program of the exhibits under that and make a space where you could sort of gather at the end of the boardwalk and sort of just enjoy that view. And then always there's this dialogue between the exhibit itself and the exterior. So on the interior of the Staten Island Zoo, what we did is, it was a similar strategy, just covering over the roof. But here, because it is a very scripted sort of sequence, we kept that as a landscape that you just looked at. They really don't have a lot of green planting inside the aquarium, and we thought that was something that we should add. So here, this project, this is that idea that between the program and the context, you can build something that creates this third thing that was sort of not called for, but is sort of derived from the two things that were given. And this next project is a very small version of that as well.
Yes. This next project is a renovation of a library at a Montessori school. This was our first DDC project, which we got as part of the Design Excellence program. You can see here the footprint of the existing library was extremely small. It was really much more like a book storage area. When we went to the site, we were actually inspired kind of by the opportunity around the space. And what's shown on the top here is the interior of that library space, and what's shown below is the teacher's lounge, which is actually adjacent across the hall. You can see it on the left there, called staff room. We really thought perhaps we could kind of reimagine this library more as a book hub and sort of learning central heart for the school, and allow the circulation to continue, but at the same time grab all of this space. And we spoke to the teachers about it. They were delighted with the whole idea. We relocated the staff room so they would still have a staff room. And then we gathered all the space and created one larger library that also had circulation through. You can see here the first model that we put together for this. And what we introduced, because we did have extra space now, was this raked seating element, which was something new for the school that was completely outside of what they were looking for. And as a result, it allowed them to increase their programming and change their curriculum. Also, because this space is underground, there was no natural light or windows into this space, so we felt that it was very important to create a kind of horizon or some kind of landscape feel. So we employed reflective, like a mirror at the back wall there, screened clouds, and the reflective ceiling, kind of visually doubling the space and definitely brightening it up. And you can see here at the library there, you see the seating. They started having extra programs, and additionally, they were delighted because the project came in under budget, and we were actually able to renovate the upstairs reception. This is a picture of that. This next project is the Barbie Shanghai project. And in 2007, we were hired by Mattel to design a flagship store for Barbie. This project really grew out of the work that Ogilvy Mather Brand Integration Group was doing with Mattel at the time, where they were really seeking to realign Barbie with her fashion roots and kind of expand the audience to include women as well as girls. All of this was really part of a much larger effort to establish Barbie not just as a reflection of fashion, but really as a former of fashion. And this is actually the Barbie fashion show that was at Bryant Park last year. So there are a lot of people around the world that identify with Barbie. This is the Barbie that we are all familiar with, this kind of instrument of imagination and projection. There's this aspirational quality to the doll that we certainly wanted to capture. She was incidentally the first female astronaut. And, you know, there's also, she's a cultural lightning rod, there's no getting around it, and she inspires serious and ironic rebellion. And, you know, love her or hate her, you know her, and she definitely inspires some kind of feeling. So really, how to reflect all this in a store in one physical space. There were several ideas that seemed to resonate in both Barbie play and architectural design for us, and the first and very powerful one that we moved toward was immediately scale. We thought this idea of using scale, particularly the way that scale, you know, the girl to the doll and the girl to the woman, it's kind of the center of the way people play with Barbie and is a very useful element. The other thing that we thought had could have impact here was this incorporation of dimensionality and sort of specifically how two-dimensional things can become virtually three-dimensional things, or we can pretend they are with kind of perspective or elevation. The other thing is, you know, repetition, and obviously collection is a huge part of the Barbie experience and needed to be incorporated into this design. Now, in this case, it was interesting that we had this reference in the Barbie house, and what we wanted to do is we all knew the Barbie house, everyone in the office was familiar with the Barbie house, and we wanted to really distill and impart, you know, what's essential about the Barbie house into this larger House of Barbie, as the project was called. This is a picture of the site in its first incarnation as the first movie theater in Shanghai. This is a picture when we saw it on the scene. It's on Weihai Road, which is a major shopping street in Shanghai. Here, you can see as the first movie theater in Shanghai, it presented some real challenges in the interior with floor-to-floor heights and lots of stepping, things that needed to be incorporated in the design very carefully. As I mentioned, Mattel and Big was very interested in anchoring Barbie in history, and so one of the things that kept coming up was the use of kind of historical architectural facades potentially, and you know, maybe Art Nouveau, maybe sort of European design houses, and we were interested in this kind of imagery, but didn't want to reproduce it literally. Thought maybe a sort of embossed glass, cast glass facade was one approach we were investigating. Another idea we were looking at was, you know, reflecting this idea of mass production and repetition, and maybe we could do something that was transparent yet reflected the very curvaceous doll that we all know. This was actually the first concept model that we presented to Mattel, and it was literally the blister packaging from an actual Barbie toy with a curtain wall. They were very interested in this, and we actually, it kind of morphed into a more architectural sensibility where we adopted forms that could be read on a number of scales. You know, these shapes here can function as lockets, as frames, and this is an early model of the interior sort of for investigation purposes. And here's, with further development, it was a layered approach that we were going for, and you can see on the left side, there's a proposed frit pattern for the curtain wall, and then there's this second layer, which is this formed polycarbonate, and then on the right you see everything working together. This is a frit pattern that was actually created by Big, and it really works reinforcing the architectural elements that are transparent behind, as well as the, you know, very opaque spandrel beams. And here's a detail of that same frit that they designed, and you can see actually at a very close scale that it actually features all of these Barbie references from hearts and stilettos and bags. So it was important that this store work at a number of distances, that, you know, from the street, from close up, and then actually standing in the store. Here's a presentation of the final facade rendering. And we also curved and softened the corners, as you can see, by kind of taking down some of the, there were some bits on the exterior that we were able to have removed. Here's an investigation model that was from our office, sort of looking at the way that these two layers could work together with the translucence and the frit pattern of the light that comes in. Now, this is the first mock-up polycarbonate panel that we had formed in China, and one of the things that was very interesting about working in China was this mocking up a variety of things, not just the curtain wall, which is, you know, fairly typical, but a number of fixtures, and it was nice that we were able to do a lot of custom work there. This is a video of, now I'm really getting tricky. How does that go? What we've got here is a video of one of the first, or we might not have it here, is one of the first LED tests, because the facade was completely color programmed, so it was very important to everyone involved, particularly Mattel, that the colors be exactly right to reflect the brand. They can be any color, but it's typically pink. because it's Barbie. So here's the actual facade, and you can see close up, you can see the frit, the iconography, and the way that the fritting pattern works with the architectural sort of polycarbonate shapes behind. Standing across the street at night, see, it's usually pink. Here we are looking at the side, and the thing that's important about this is that this is why high road, and it's quite dense, and you can't really get a long view of it. So it's important that the store actually projects something out, and in this case, it spills out light. So as you're coming down the sidewalk, you really can't see the store, but you can see this kind of pink glow on the sidewalk, and it really acts as a beacon. So the retail floors here are actually 3, 4, and 5. And it was incredibly important because of this to pull people seamlessly and logically into the store and then get them up as quickly as possible. The lobby here we really conceived to act as a sort of cleansing vestibule or something that was a contrast to the frenetic street. So it's really very smooth, white surfaces without hard lines at all. And there's a hint of pink in the back of that lobby, which is the escalator, making it very clear. So while the entry vestibule is potentially cleansing and relaxed, this is anything but, and this is like 100% Barbie. This is really pink. They play giggles in here. It's a very intense introduction to where you're going, and we thought that it was playful and interesting that you would come into the Barbie store through this pink tube. So now getting to the interior organization, which really was a challenge, as I mentioned before, the team was trying to expand the brand. We always felt that whatever we were doing with the store, it was critical that the store physically and conceptually evolve and revolve around this central Barbie spine. We felt that it would be very successful if it were to be incorporated in the main circulation, because then people are coming and going and interacting with it on a regular basis. Here's a view of the store as you actually come up the escalator, and you can see that central Barbie spine along with the different apartments that are created at the perimeter, and this is the main double height space going from the 3rd to the 4th floors. There are about 800 Barbie dolls surrounding the stair. As I mentioned, as we were trying to introduce a really broad array of products, we felt it was important that everything have a very custom environment, but at the same time that the environments not be sealed off. So we conceived of it as a distinct series of spaces that were more created with materials and forms rather than hard walls, kind of like a agglomeration of bubbles that we see here. These are some of the products that were to be featured in the store, and it went everything from couture to high-end jewelry to electronics to even a doll design center, toys. The team worked very hard with consultants and the client and came up with this organization where the 3rd floor would be all the things aimed at the women, from women's products, shoes, couture, fashion, makeup. The 4th floor is everything around the doll, like accessories, like clothes, toys, cars, houses, and the 5th floor was all the things for the girl, the sports equipment and the dresses, etc. And the 6th floor is actually a full-service restaurant. These are some of the departments here. You can see the couture area. This is a detail of the way that the facade creates that translucent light. This is an overall view. Now we're standing in couture looking back out at the main floor, and you can see here this runway, which is central, which acts as a reminder again that we're focusing on fashion and what that means in a Barbie context. This is the makeup counter. Now this is women's fashion, and again here we are playing with this idea of scale and view, because these fixtures are meant to get back to that house idea. They're supposed to look like supersized flowers, if you look or recall, kind of petal fixtures on this field of green, which is important because the 4th floor is actually open and you can look down at them. And it kind of gives this kind of fantasy garden idea. Scale was very important, as I mentioned before, and we found it very fitting that the 4th floor, which is the open floor, be the doll floor, because you can actually have this effect whereby you're looking at the doll and see people sort of in the same perspective view, and it kind of evens things out in a kind of fun way. The 4th floor also has a lot of interactive elements. This is where the toy area is. You can see here it's intensely pink, no denying. And there's a cloud light fixture, kind of meant to remind people that Barbie's about imagination and play. Media area. This is the doll design center behind the doors. And here we have, these are the really archival, very special dolls to Mattel. And they're featured in a series of scrims, potentially sort of floating in these portholes that are cut out. Now we're actually in the doll design center where kids can go and create dolls, custom dolls. The 5th floor is where things are really focused on the little girl, and we thought that we could accentuate this by scaling things up and making people feel almost doll-sized. This is a dressing room. It's meant to feel like a giant skirt. The shade above is actually operable. The one-dimensional, two-dimensional thing came into the design of some of the fixtures. These are the cash wraps. These are chairs we designed for the restaurant. It was significant that they're a mix of Western antiques, contemporary pieces, and Asian antiques. We had the opportunity to design, I mean, all the way down to the dishes. This was a fantastic experience from a total design standpoint. Here's a view of the 5th floor restaurant, and you can see the chairs there. And now we're leaving, and there are rear view mirrors on the escalator.
The last project we're going to show is another DDC project. This project is located in Staten Island. It's the Staten Island Zoo, which is located in Barrett Park, which is actually New York City Parks. So the project came after a master plan had been done by Gruz and Sampton. The master plan identified a few elements that had to be sort of done in the first phase. The most important element is that the primary entrance to Staten Island is currently on this, on the right side here, which is Broadway, but nobody actually uses that entrance because the parking lot is down here. So everybody comes through a service entrance at the back. So one of the things they identified was the need to create a real entrance here and an entry building. They also wanted a redesign of the children's zoo, which is in the back of the main buildings. They had proposed to locate a new carousel here in this part of the park, and to create a new leopard exhibit adjacent to the existing animal hospital. So the structure of the zoo is pretty traditional. There are a series of formal kind of zoo buildings that contain most of the animals in the front, and then the back has this kind of informal children's zoo, or children's farmstead as they call it, and that is all kind of enclosed within this New York City park. So the little farmstead is sort of a sort of farm oasis within a park. This is a view of that main, or second entrance, which is the main entrance for most people. The first thing that we were addressing was the fence, and we proposed that we would create a sort of wrought iron fence, but shape the member so that as you move down the road, it creates a sense of movement, and potentially even as you're walking down the street. As you come into the zoo, they have a temporary sort of ticketing booth, and then you walk between the park and the children's farmstead toward the main part of the zoo. The farmstead itself has kind of grown over the years. It's kind of an ad hoc assembly of different sheds and fences and a lot of pavement. There are, I think, 13 different sheds for the little animals. So this is the scope of our project, this sort of phase 1 master plan and buildings. The project is, like I said, it's a DDC project, and part of their requirement is that this meet LEED Silver. And so this will be actually the second zoo. Kind of unbelievably, this will be only the second zoo in the country to be LEED Silver. You'd think all zoos would be striving for that. So one of the main things that we wanted to achieve was to reduce the impermeable area. So we took it from 26% to 17%. And then the other thing that, because it is located in this park, it has really great trees in the park. The whole site is surrounded and has trees within it as well, which was a challenge and an opportunity because we had to obviously protect the trees and try and build all this stuff between them. So we've been working very closely with the Parks Department and Department of Cultural Affairs, the DDC, and the Staten Island Zoo to sort of negotiate locations and appropriate means of building. The main part of the project, as I said, was the children's zoo in the center. And then we located the entry building here so that you come sort of through the entry building. It performs sort of like a gate into a sort of central courtyard here, which has some sort of bleacher seating sort of cut into the landscape so that kids can come here and gather as they go into the zoo. We propose to relocate the carousel enclosure here, and then the leopard exhibit is kept in the same location that was identified in the Gruz and Sampton plan. The site is sloped down toward the entry, and we took advantage of that in terms of the views through the zoo, so that the views from the bottom and the top are pretty different. This is a computer model of the site, and you can see the full assembly of spaces. To define the children's zoo area, we wanted to create some sort of green thresholds, either using landscape or planting. And within the zoo itself, we referred to sort of farm structures, and also we proposed that we would create a farm where they could actually grow some of the food that's being fed to the animals to really carry this idea of the farm through. We also used are proposing to use permeable paving throughout the exhibit area. So in the wintertime, when you have very few people, this can just be left like snow-covered and not groomed. In the summertime, people can actually walk on it. This is just a reference image for the type of seating that would be built at the entry. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the buildings themselves. There are, as I said, the existing zoo has about, I think, 13 different sheds to house all the animals. We decided to combine them into 3, and then we use those strategically, located them strategically within the park to work with the views and the slope of the site, and then using similar strategies to the ones we described for Ordos. We distorted the shape of this thing so that it takes on a different view and seems to change in dimension from different angles. We also proposed that one of the barns have a path, the circulation path sort of goes through it so that you can kind of see the inner workings of a barn that would have exhibits about mice and spiders and things like that. The entry building is located at the entry, as you would expect, and it's kind of broken up into 2 buildings with a roof spanning over to create the entrance. Again, it sort of uses the same strategies as the barn buildings, but because it's at the perimeter and adjacent to the park, we also wanted to sort of maybe make it ambiguous in terms of if it was an extension of the fence or potentially a kind of landscape element with these roof forms on it. As I mentioned before, you sort of walk through the building to get to the main entrance. On one side you have a shop, on the other side you have a library, multifunction space, and an office. The third element, which is actually we've issued construction documents for, is the leopard enclosure. Here, the main goal was to take advantage of the existing environment to create a very rich environment for the leopards. The leopards are currently housed in that brick structure at the front, and they really need to be outside, and this will provide sort of the latest and best exhibit possible. This is being designed by the Portico Group in Seattle, and we've made a big effort to incorporate all of the existing trees, which actually help the exhibit because they provide shade for the animals. And then this is the last structure which we're working on right now, which is the carousel enclosure. We located it, as I said, in a different place than was identified in the master plan because we thought it should be adjacent to the sort of public facilities like the zoo cafe and the main reptile wing because there's a sort of plaza there, and we wanted to take advantage of that hardscape. And in addition, for the queuing, we created a kind of deck that's elevated above the ground so that you don't actually create more impermeable area and you have the ground kind of passing smoothly beneath it. Because the carousel is this feature, we wanted the enclosure to sort of disappear a little bit, and we wanted to really be able to see the carousel inside. Most of the carousel enclosures we've seen are so dark that you can't actually see what's inside. So we're proposing an ETFE roof, which is a translucent membrane, so light can go in, and then the perimeter is defined by a series of operable glass partitions. The building is raised above grade, as I said, to protect the existing trees adjacent to it, and then we're taking advantage of those trees to use them as almost architecturally so that they provide shade in the summer, keep the roof cool, and in the wintertime when there are no leaves, the sun can heat up the ETFE roof. And then obviously we have windows that are open in the summer to allow cross ventilation and closed in the summer to capture that heat so that we have a passive sort of heating system for the enclosure. This is the way that the doors stack. We wanted to make them as large as possible, but obviously the bigger you make them, you have to put them somewhere, so we stack them sort of on top of each other. We also created a frit pattern, and that was based on animals, and it starts from a sort of solid pattern with the animals cut out of it, goes to clear, and then goes to a solid animals at the other edge. This is a model, and then I have one more thing to show you here. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but so this is a video that George Bernanke from our office did, and we wanted to thank George, Tian, Nicole, all the people in our office for helping us put this slideshow together, and of course all the people who have been through our office who put all the work together, which is a lot more effort. Thank you. thought.